The world had been pain for a long time. Aaron Raines remembered it clearly. The hum of fluorescent lights in the oncology ward, the slow drip of an IV line, the sterile smell that clung to everything. He had learned to measure life in doses, milliliters of morphine, millimeters of tumor growth, minutes between labored breaths. When the end came, it had been quiet. A sigh, a dimming, and then nothing. Now there was breath again. He woke lying on his back in cool soil, the scent of rain and crushed leaves filling his lungs. For a few bewildered seconds, he thought he had only dreamed the hospital. But the air was too clean, the sky too wide. A canopy of green swayed above him, sunlight spilling through in broken coins of gold. For the first time in years, he felt no pain, no dull ache in his spine, no fire in his chest. He sat up slowly, half afraid the movement would tear something inside him. But nothing did. His body was whole, strong, young. He laughed once, a short, incredulous sound that startled a bird from a nearby branch. The forest was impossibly alive. Insects buzzed through beams of light, tiny specks dancing in warm air. A stream murmured somewhere close by. The air smelled of moss and thunder. He pressed his palms into the loam, savoring the cool, damp texture.
"I'm alive."
The forest answered with silence, and then with movement. A rustle in the ferns behind him. He turned, half expecting a squirrel. The serpent struck before he saw it clearly. A flash of emerald scales, the glint of curved fangs, the sudden searing bite to his calf. Pain flared white. Instinct took over. Aaron's hand closed on a jagged stone beside him, and he swung. Once, twice, again. The serpent writhed, its body lashing against his arm, and then stilled. He stumbled back, panting, staring at the thing he'd killed. Its head was crushed, the rest still twitching as nerves died. The heat in his legs spread upward, his veins burned, the edges of his vision darkened. He tried to stand, but his knees folded under him, his heartbeat pounding in his ears like distant thunder. Each breath came shallower than the last. He toppled onto his side, eyes fixed on the broken body of the snake.
Figures. Can't even enjoy one morning.
The world bled of color. Then everything stopped. Darkness pressed in, thick and weightless. A faint whisper of sound drifted through it. Glass chiming, wind curling through a hollow space. And then words, bright as starlight, appeared above him. Stat increased. Death resistance plus 1.0, total 1. Poison resistance plus 0.3. Total 0.3, regeneration plus 0.1, total 1.1. The symbols pulsed once, fading like breath on cold air. He gasped and sat upright. The forest returned in a rush of color and sound, the chirp of birds, the hiss of the breeze through leaves. His leg was unmarked. The snake was gone. For a long moment he simply stared at his hands, flexing them, feeling blood move through veins that should have been empty. The last glowing word, regeneration, hung behind his eyes like an afterimage. Memory crashed through him, a woman's voice in the dark after death, soft and amused.
"One gift only, mortal. Choose well."
He had seen visions then, 1,000 powers unfurling before him like cards, strength, flight, magic, speed. And he, dying and desperate for peace, had chosen the simplest one. Regeneration, a body that would never fail again. He hadn't known it would bring him here, wherever here was, but it had saved him. Aaron leaned against the tree's roots and exhaled. The forest gave no answer. By afternoon, he had learned 2 things. He was alive, and the forest wanted that to change. Everything here was sharper, hungrier, more deliberate than the woods he remembered from Earth. Thorns tore skin like blades. Even the air seemed thick with competition, the hiss of insects, the shriek of unseen birds, the rustle of predators moving where light didn't reach. He followed the sound of water until he found a stream winding through stones slick with moss. He drank greedily, then stopped as his reflection rippled back at him. His body was leaner than he remembered, muscles drawn tight, scars faded to nothing. He still looked human. When night fell, he built a small shelter from fallen branches and leaves, the kind of crude lean-to a Boy Scout would laugh at. It held through the first rainfall. That alone felt like victory. By morning, he was ready to leave. He followed the stream, reasoning that water must lead somewhere, civilization, a road, anything. The forest had other ideas. Hours passed. The light shifted, dimming from gold to green to gray, But the trees never changed. Every clearing looked like the one before it. Every sound seemed to circle back on itself. He marked trees with stones, then found the same markings again hours later. He climbed a ridge and saw nothing but endless canopies stretching to the horizon. The realization hit him slow and cold. There was no clear direction. The forest folded back on itself like a maze that hated being solved. He kept walking until his legs trembled and his breath came ragged. The air thickened, heavy with mist and the smell of rain. When he finally stopped, he was standing beneath a giant tree, its trunk wider than a house, its roots twisting like the bones of the earth. He leaned against it, drained of strength. For the first time since waking, fear crept in, a deep, quiet kind that lived behind the ribs. The forest stretched in every direction, endless and silent. He sank down at the base of the tree and rested his head against the bark. The wood was rough but solid, humming faintly with the pulse of insects tunneling deep inside. Every breath he took carried the wet sweetness of moss and decay.
I just want a road, or a trail, or, hell, an abandoned campsite.
Only the drip of water answered. He let his eyes close for a moment. The exhaustion in his muscles wasn't the normal kind. It was the ache of someone who'd walked an entire world and found nothing at the end of it. When he opened them again, the light had changed. Evening bled into the forest in bruised shades of blue. Mist clung to the ground. A sound broke the stillness, soft, deliberate. Not the chaotic scurry of small creatures, but the padded rhythm of something heavy that understood patience. Aaron stilled. His pulse quickened. He knew that cadence. He'd heard it once in a zoo years ago. Predator. He scanned the undergrowth. The mist swallowed everything beyond a few yards. Then a low growl vibrated through the air, deep enough to shake leaves loose from their stems. Golden eyes appeared first, twin embers hanging in the dark. The jaguar stepped from the ferns, its muscles rippling beneath a coat dappled like broken sunlight. Its breath steamed in the cooling air. Aaron's mind raced. No weapons, no shelter close enough to reach. He bent slowly, hand closing around a fallen branch. The bark was slick with moisture, but it was better than nothing. The cat's ears flattened. He barely saw it move. One moment it crouched, the next it was a blur of motion, muscle and speed colliding with him. The impact drove the air from his lungs. He swung the branch with all the force he had left. The wood cracked across the jaguar's shoulder. It roared, the sound too big for the space, claws tearing through his chest and arm. He hit the ground hard, pain exploding behind his ribs. He shoved upward once more, stabbing with the splintered end of the branch. It sank shallowly into the beast's shoulder. The cat reared back snarling and then came down again. The world flashed white. When he opened his eyes, the forest was quiet. Dew clung to the grass. Birds called in the high canopy. His body was whole again, his skin unbroken. For a heartbeat he lay there, confused. Then memory returned. The eyes, the claws, the pain, and he let out a shaky laugh that sounded half like disbelief. Stat increased. Death resistance plus 1.0, total 2. Endurance plus 0.1, total 0.1. Pain resistance plus 0.1, total 0.1. Regeneration plus 0.1, total 1.2. Aaron sat up and rubbed a hand over his face. The air still smelled faintly of blood that wasn't there.
Fine. Round 2.
When night came, he built another shelter, smaller, tighter, hidden beneath the roots of a fallen tree. He listened to the forest instead, every rustle a heartbeat, every breath a warning. Far off, the jaguar called again, a low, drawn-out rumble that slid through the mist like thunder from an unseen storm. Aaron smiled into the dark.
Come find me then.
The forest did not answer, but he could feel it watching. Morning broke with thin sunlight filtering through fog. Aaron woke to the quiet ache that came after too much living. Legs heavy, lungs raw from cold air, a dozen small pains that reminded him he was still human. He ate nothing. There was nothing to eat. The stream beside his camp whispered mockery, carrying fish that scattered the moment his shadow touched the water. He tried chasing them once. The mud claimed his footing and dumped him face first into the current. He crawled out dripping, half laughing, half cursing. By midday, the hunger settled into a steady burn beneath his ribs. It hollowed thought and sharpened every smell, the resin of trees, the musk of damp fur, even the faint sweetness of crushed leaves. Somewhere deep in the brush, a bright patch of color caught his eye. Berries, dozens of them, each a perfect sphere of red, glistening as if polished by unseen hands. He hesitated only a moment.
Food's food.
He plucked a handful. They were tart, almost pleasant, until the fire hit. It began behind his tongue and crawled downward, a chain of heat searing his throat and stomach. He doubled over, choking. The trees folded inward, the sky tilted, and then the world shut off like a switch. He woke in the same clearing, the same sunlight breaking through the branches. The bush still swayed gently, as though waiting. His mouth tasted of metal and dirt. Skill increased. Death resistance plus 1.0, total 3. Poison resistance plus 0.1, total 0.4. He spat, glaring at the berries.
All right, lesson learned.
A moment later, he grabbed another handful and shoved them in. The sickness came faster this time, but it burned less. He lay on his side, laughing weakly through the spasms.
Guess we're doing this the hard way.
He died again. Poison resistance plus 0.1. And again. Poison resistance plus 0.1. The sun shifted overhead, indifferent. Each time he revived, the fire inside him dimmed a little more until the pain became a dull, distant heat. By the 10th attempt, his stomach still turned, but the agony had dulled to nausea. The poison couldn't keep up anymore. His body learned faster than it could kill him. When the taste finally stopped making him tremble, he sat there for a long while, breathing hard. His stomach ached, his lips were stained red, and the ground around him was littered with crushed berries and the imprints of his hands where he'd fallen over and over again. The sun had moved twice across the canopy by the time he felt steady enough to stand. Every bush within reach had been stripped bare. His hunger was gone, replaced by the faint hum of power working quietly through his veins. A shimmer of faint light flickered before his eyes. Skill increased. Poison resistance plus 0.1. Total 33.4. Regeneration plus 0.1. Total 11.2. He stared at the glowing text until it faded, a small grin tugging at the corner of his mouth.
Guess persistence counts for something.
He spent the rest of the afternoon hunting the way a stubborn man experiments, with trial, error, and multiple deaths. A frog with brilliant stripes proved lethal by touch. He woke hours later with the smell of singed grass in his nose. A plant that looked like mint filled his lungs with smoke. His vision blanked. Each mistake wrote a new rule into the strange ledger, hovering somewhere behind his eyes. When night came, he collapsed near his shelter, muscles trembling. He didn't bother building a fire. The stars above the canopy were enough. For the first time since waking in this world, he let himself stop thinking. No plans, no theories, no questions about why or how, just breath and heartbeat and the ache of a body that refused to quit. The air was cool and heavy with the scent of damp leaves. Somewhere in the dark, an owl called, long and hollow. The sound carried through the trees like a voice from a forgotten world. Aaron smiled faintly.
Guess I'm still here.
He closed his eyes and let the forest's slow heartbeat carry him into uneasy sleep. The next morning dawned cold and gray. Mist hung low over the forest floor, curling around the roots and stones like restless ghosts. Aaron's stomach growled, and he took it as a sign that this world, at the very least, hadn't taken away his hunger for good. He needed a weapon. The jaguar hadn't come back, but the forest was full of things that would. He'd seen too many tracks, massive three-toed prints pressed deep into the mud, claw marks on tree bark taller than his head. Whatever lived here, it wasn't made for mercy. He found a sturdy branch as thick as his forearm and tested its weight. It wasn't perfect, but it had balance. Kneeling beside a fallen trunk, he took a flat stone in his hand and began grinding the tip of the branch against it, using the bark for leverage. The rhythm settled into something steady and purposeful. Scrape, turn, scrape again, the sound rough and rhythmic, like sharpening an idea into focus. It took hours. His hands blistered. The stone broke twice. By the time he finished, his arms trembled and his throat was dry, but the branch looked deadly enough.
First spear. Let's see if you're worth the trouble.
He began to practice. At first, he missed everything. Trees, bushes, shadows. His aim was wild, his grip too tight. Each throw ended with the spear clattering uselessly to the ground, but he kept going. He died enough times to understand that stubbornness counted as a survival skill here. Throw, retrieve, throw again. Every repetition made his movements a little smoother, his stance a little surer. By sunset, he was hitting what he aimed for, most of the time. He sat by the stream, wiping sweat from his brow, and stared at the spear resting across his knees. The wood was worn where his hands gripped it, the tip stained with sap and earth. He couldn't help but feel proud. Skill increased, spear mastery plus 0.1, total 0.1. The stat flickered faintly in his vision, then faded. He leaned back, listening to the forest breathe around him. Somewhere nearby, water lapped against stones, steady as a heartbeat. For a rare moment, peace felt possible. Then the underbrush cracked. The sound was sharp and close, too heavy to be a bird or squirrel. Aaron grabbed his spear, heart suddenly racing. The sound came again, followed by a low grunt. Something big moved through the trees. A boar burst into the clearing, tusks gleaming, eyes rolling in panic. Its body was a slab of muscle, its snout slick with mud and blood. It had probably smelled the carcass of the snake he'd killed days ago, or maybe it just didn't like him being here. Aaron stepped sideways, spear raised.
Easy now, we can both.
The beast charged. He thrust the spear forward. It hit, but shallow, sliding along thick hide. The boar screamed, lowering its head for another charge. Aaron tightened his grip, planting his feet. There was no room to run. The beast thundered toward him, the ground shaking with every step. He braced the spear against his chest, the point leveled straight ahead. When it struck, the impact was like being hit by a wall. The shaft drove backward, the butt slamming hard against the tree behind him. The spearhead punched deep into the boar's chest, sinking through muscle and bone until it stopped. For an instant, the animal hung there, impaled, squealing in rage and agony. Then, its weight collapsed forward. The shaft shattered. One of its tusks caught Aaron's side and drove through him before the body fell, pinning him to the tree. He barely had time to register the pain, white, sharp, and final, before everything went dark. When he woke, he was lying beneath the same tree. The boar's carcass lay a few feet away, steam rising from its open wound. The forest was quiet again. Aaron exhaled shakily.
You have got to be kidding me.
He pushed the body off with a grunt, ribs aching though unbroken now, and looked down at the splintered remains of his spear. Stat increased, strength plus 0.1, total 0.4, spear mastery plus 0.2, total 0.3, regeneration plus 0.2, total 11.5. He stared at the numbers until they vanished. Then he sat down beside the boar, exhaustion giving way to satisfaction. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. He was learning, getting stronger. The system, whatever it was, rewarded progress. He skinned what he could of the beast using a shard of wood sharpened to a point. The hide was thick and clumsy under his hands, the smell of blood heavy in the humid air. He cut a strip of meat from the flank and hesitated. The flesh was dark, still warm. He knew what raw meat could do, bacteria, parasites, but hunger didn't care about science. He tore a bite free and forced it down. The taste was foul, metallic, and wild. He gagged once, swallowed again, and kept chewing until his body accepted it. It wasn't pleasant, but it was food. When he'd eaten as much as he could stomach, he wiped his mouth on the back of his hand and sat beside the carcass, chest rising and falling slowly. The forest whispered around him, the soft hum of insects, the faint cry of something distant and large. He stared into the dark and let the quiet settle. For the first time since waking, his stomach wasn't empty. It wasn't comfort, but it was enough. For a little while, the Hellwood felt almost like home. By morning, the forest was still. Aaron returned to the clearing where he had killed the boar, expecting to find scavengers. Instead, the carcass lay untouched, half sunk in the mud, steam still rising faintly from its torn flank. He crouched beside it, running a hand over the hide.
Still good. Guess breakfast's back on the menu.
He had just cut a strip of meat when the light dimmed. The air changed, heavy, charged, wrong. A shadow rolled over the ground, massive wings blotting out the sun. Aaron froze, knife hand still. He looked up. Something vast moved above the canopy, silent but for the rush of air from its wings. Scales like burnished iron, eyes like molten gold. The creature descended in a slow, circling glide. Its barbed tail shimmered wetly, poison dripping in thick black lines that smoked when they hit the soil. He barely had time to stand before it landed. The impact shook the earth. A wyvern. It opened its jaws and hissed, a sound like a forge exhaling flame. The scent of sulfur and rot filled the clearing. In a single motion, it lunged forward, claws hooking the boar's body and dragging it toward itself. Aaron shouted and drove his crude spear at its leg. The tip struck, glancing off the armored hide with a hollow crack. The wyvern's head snapped toward him, eyes narrowing. The tail flicked once. Pain seared his chest as the barb tore through him, hot venom flooding his blood in a heartbeat. He fell backward, choking, vision tunneling as the world went white. The wyvern took the carcass in its claws, spread its wings, and rose into the sky, carrying his hard-won kill with it. He tried to curse it, but his breath failed. The last thing he saw was a trail of dark liquid burning holes into the leaves where drops of poison fell. Then, nothing. He woke hours later, lying on the cold earth, staring up through the canopy. His body was whole again, though the memory of the poison still crawled through his veins. The boar's corpse was gone. The ground was scarred and black where the wyvern's claws had struck. Stat increased. Death resistance plus 1.0. Total 4. Poison resistance plus 0.3. Total 33.7. Regeneration plus 0.1. Total 11.6. Aaron pushed himself upright slowly, breathing through the phantom pain in his chest. His camp was ruined, his food gone, his pride shredded. He looked toward the distant peaks where the creature had flown.
You can keep the meat, but I'm taking the rest of you one day.
The vow hung in the still air, sharp as a blade. From that day on, the wyvern wasn't just another beast in the forest. It was his nemesis, the unseen ruler of the Hellwood, the one thing he couldn't yet kill. 6 months had passed and the forest had stopped trying to kill him, or maybe it had just learned that it couldn't. Aaron moved through the Hellwood like something that belonged there now. His body had changed, leaner, stronger, every muscle hardened by repetition and recovery. His skin carried faint traces of old scars, though most healed before they ever fully formed. He no longer looked like a man lost in the woods. He looked like a predator that had learned to survive among monsters. His only clothing was a rough loincloth made from the boar's hide, tied at the waist with a strip of leather. It wasn't comfortable, but it was all he needed. The forest didn't care about modesty, and neither did he anymore. His skin had long since hardened to the sting of cold rain and the scrape of bark. He had made this section of the forest his territory. The traps he'd built with sharpened stakes lined the pathways. Branches tied with woven fibers created alarms that clicked when disturbed. Small shelters sat high in the trees, reachable only by rope ladders he could pull up behind him. And the spear, his pride. It was no longer a crude branch. The shaft was carved from tempered wood, hardened over the faint chemical flame produced by the gland of a fire frog he'd learned to harvest carefully. The creature's secretion burned slow and blue when exposed to air, dangerous but controllable with patience and distance. He used the strange flame to cure wood, dry meat, and shape bone. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. The tip of his spear was an ivory shard, one of the boar's tusks, carved down and polished to a gleaming point. The weapon felt balanced now, made by his own hand and earned through pain. Skill increased, weapon crafting plus 0.1, total 15.4, fire starting plus 0.1, total 20.7. It had taken weeks of experimentation and more than one close call with fire frog venom, but he'd mastered flame at last, not through flint or steel, but through the forest's own strange biology. He spent his days hunting and his nights training. If something moved in the dark, he studied it. If something killed him, he learned from it. By now, he'd lost count of the number of deaths. He knew only that his body no longer feared the process. The pain came, the darkness followed, and then the light brought him back whole again. Skills: regeneration 63.9, endurance 51.0, agility 38.3, spear mastery 42.6. The numbers appeared and faded like memories of dreams, but he could feel them in every motion, every breath, every strike, every kill. One afternoon, a basilisk lunged from the reeds by the water's edge. Its scales shimmered in greens and browns, eyes burning with unnatural light. Aaron didn't hesitate. He sidestepped, thrust, and drove his spear clean through its throat in a single motion. The creature writhed once, then went still. He stood over it, catching his breath.
That all you've got?
Skill increased, spear mastery plus 0.1, total 42.7. He dragged the corpse aside, carved off a strip of meat, and set it on a flat stone near his firefrog flame. The smell was sharp and bitter, but familiar now. He ate slowly, staring into the faint blue firelight. When the last bite was gone, he extended a hand toward the flame. The heat bit instantly, reddening his skin. He didn't flinch. He'd done this hundreds of times before. Every night, he pushed a little closer, fingers first, then palms, then forearms, holding his skin to the edge of blistering until the pain was too much, then letting the regeneration undo the damage. The smell of burned flesh no longer bothered him. It was just the scent of progress. Sometimes he talked to the fire as if it were an old rival.
You'll give up before I do.
Each session left him trembling, but the results were undeniable. The pain grew duller, the heat more bearable. What had once been agony was now routine. Skill increased, heat resistance plus 0.1, total 78.3, regeneration plus 0.1, total 62.2. He flexed his hand as the last trace of the burn vanished.
Almost there, almost maxed.
The wyvern hadn't returned, not yet. But sometimes, late at night, he would hear the distant echo of wings high above the canopy, a whisper that reminded him the debt hadn't been paid. The days blurred together in the Hellwood, but Aaron's instincts never dulled. Every sunrise came with new noises, new prey, new predators, and the same promise of blood. He'd been tracking something for 3 days now. Claw marks the size of his hands scarred the trees. Tufts of gold and white feathers clung to thorns, and the prints were unlike anything he'd seen. Half talon, half paw. When he crouched beside the latest print, he couldn't help but grin.
You're big. Good. I could use the challenge.
He'd grown tired of lesser beasts. Nothing in the forest pushed him anymore, but this thing, whatever it was, might. He followed the trail through the mist, moving barefoot and silent. His breath fogged lightly in the cool air. The deeper he went, the thinner the canopy grew until sunlight spilled through in pale ribbons. Then he saw it. A griffin, wings spread, mane rippling in the breeze, talons sunk into the corpse of a massive serpent. It tore chunks of flesh with its hooked beak, feathers glinting bronze and gold in the light. Aaron crouched low, watching. His pulse quickened. The sight was beautiful and deadly.
All right, let's see how you fly with one wing.
He crept closer, each step deliberate. When he was within striking distance, he inhaled once, steadying his hand, and thrust. The spear shot forward and bit deep into the creature's wing. The griffin shrieked, a sound that tore through the trees like metal ripping. It spun, slashing with a talon that caught Aaron across the chest. He stumbled, barely keeping his feet.
Yeah, I probably deserve that.
The beast lunged again. He rolled aside, grabbed the spear, and struck at its side. The weapon skidded off bone. The griffin's tail lashed, knocking him flat. His spear flew from his hands. The griffin pounced, beak snapping inches from his face. He caught it by the throat with both hands and shoved, muscles screaming. Its breath was hot and foul. He slammed a fist into its jaw. It reeled back, feathers scattering. He hit it again and again, his knuckles split, blood mixing with sweat and feathers. Skill increased, unarmed combat plus 0.3, total 23.9. He ducked another swipe and drove his shoulder into the creature's chest, forcing it back just long enough to grab the fallen spear. With a surge of strength, he leapt forward and drove the weapon into its heart. The griffin convulsed, wings thrashing, then collapsed in a shuddering heap. Aaron stood over it, breathing hard. Blood streaked his face, his chest, his arms. For a moment he simply stared, chest heaving, mind empty.
Finally, something that didn't die easy.
He dropped to his knees, laughing between gasps.
Feathers for a bed, meat for dinner. You're not such a bad catch after all.
He tugged the spear free and wiped the blood from the shaft. The air smelled of iron and victory. Then the light dimmed. The shadow passed over him before he even looked up. The wind changed. Branches swayed violently as something massive descended through the clouds. Aaron's smile vanished.
No.
The wyvern's roar split the air. It dove through the trees, scales glinting, tail coiled like a whip, its claws hooked into the griffin's corpse, tearing it from the ground with horrifying ease. Aaron barely dove aside as the tail struck, slicing through a tree trunk like wet parchment. Venom hissed where it touched the ground, melting grass into smoke. He shouted after it, rage overtaking shock.
You couldn't just let me have one thing, could you?
The wyvern ignored him, wings churning the air as it lifted the griffin's body into the sky and vanished into the clouds. Aaron stared upward, chest heaving, the forest silent around him. His fingers tightened around the spear. Skill increased. Spear mastery plus 0.1. Total 48.4. Regeneration plus 0.1. Total 64.4.
We'll finish this soon, you bastard lizard.
He spat into the dirt and turned away, leaving the clearing behind. But not the anger burning in his chest. The wyvern had stolen from him twice now. Once his meal, this time his victory. There wouldn't be a third. 5 years had passed since the day he first woke beneath the trees. The Hellwood no longer frightened him. It bowed to him. Night draped the forest in silence. Beneath the soft blue glow of a fire frog flame, Aaron sat cross-legged beside his camp, the faint hiss of burning air echoing through the trees. The air smelled faintly of metal and smoke. Across his lap lay his newest creation, the final version of his spear. He worked slowly, carefully, running a shard of stone along the gleaming edge of the blade he'd carved from the tail of a razor-tail serpent. The creature's spine had ended in a natural weapon, a long, double-edged blade nearly 2 feet in length, tapering into a lethal point. He'd polished it smooth, then fused it to a blackwood shaft with hardened resin and sinew. The result was perfect, simple, balanced, deadly. He held it up toward the light, turning it in his hand so the edges caught the flicker of the flame.
Now that is how you make a spear.
Skill increased, weapon crafting plus 0.1, total 53.4. He smiled faintly.
You've been patient with me, old friend. Took me 5 years to get this right.
The skull, as usual, offered no reply. Aaron leaned back on one hand, eyes on the spear's reflection in the firelight.
Hard to believe I used to swing sticks and bones like a caveman. Look at me now, civilized.
He chuckled softly, the sound rough but warm. Then he stared into the blue flame, his expression turning thoughtful.
Tomorrow I go up there and end it.
He lifted his gaze toward the black peak silhouetted against the moonlight. Somewhere beyond those clouds, the wyvern waited. He took a slow breath and nodded once as if sealing a promise.
5 years is long enough to hold a grudge.
The forest answered only with the crackle of burning air. Aaron placed the spear beside him and lay back on the hardened ground. He closed his eyes, one hand resting on the weapon. Sleep came easily now, the calm before the hunt. Morning came pale and cold. The sun was a faint smear behind the clouds, barely pushing light through the fog. Aaron stood at the edge of the forest, spear in hand, the Hellwood stretching behind him like the memory of another life. The peaks loomed ahead, sharp, white, and merciless.
All right, let's finish this.
He started walking. The trees thinned as the air grew colder. Frost clung to the bark, ice gathering on the edges of his hair. Each breath came out as a white cloud. He moved at a steady pace, chewing on the bright red berries that had once killed him countless times. He smiled faintly at the taste.
Still my favorite. Guess I'm just sentimental like that.
The ground turned to rock and snow. Wind howled down from the peaks, sharp and dry. After hours of climbing, his toes went numb, the skin turning gray at the edges.
Not good.
He gathered dry moss and kindling from beneath a rocky overhang, then cracked open one of the small pouches tied to his belt. Inside, a preserved fire frog gland shimmered faintly blue. He squeezed a drop of its secretion onto the pile and stepped back as it burst into gentle flame. The warmth spread fast. Aaron held his feet near the fire, watching color return as regeneration did the rest. Skill increased, cold resistance plus 0.1, total 8.2. He sighed in relief.
All right, that's better.
He stood, stretched, and pressed on. The climb took him a single day. Even with frost creeping along his limbs, his body refused to stop. Stamina at 100 meant he could keep moving until the mountain itself gave up. Frostbite slowed him, but regeneration burned it away as fast as it formed. By the time he reached the upper cliffs, the world below had vanished into white. The forest was gone, just wind, stone, and the endless howl of the mountain. He pressed on until finally he saw it, a gaping black maw in the side of the peak, breathing waves of heat into the frozen air. Aaron grinned weakly.
Finally.
He steadied his grip on the spear and stepped inside. The air shimmered with heat and the sulfuric tang of old fire. Steam clung to the walls, turning the stone slick and bright. The wyvern slept near the back, a living mountain of scale and muscle, chest rising and falling with slow, rumbling breaths. Aaron crept forward, spear low, every movement measured. He'd waited 5 years for this, every stat, every skill, maxed. This was the pinnacle. He drove the spear down with all his strength. The point struck and bounced. The scales were too thick. The sound was like striking iron. The wyvern's eyes snapped open.
Oh, hell.
The roar hit him like a wall. The creature reared, wings smashing against the ceiling, molten heat spilling from its throat. Aaron dove aside as fire engulfed the ground where he'd stood. The flames rolled over him, but his heat resistance was already at 100. His skin blackened, then instantly healed. He stood smirking.
You'll have to try harder than that.
The wyvern lunged, its tail lashed cracking stone. Aaron met it head-on, spear flashing, body a blur of precision. Every motion was perfect, the culmination of years of instinct and repetition. The creature struck again, slower now, its own movements dulled by pain and age. Aaron ducked under a wing, planted a foot, and drove the spear upward with every ounce of strength, straight into its open mouth. The blade pierced through the roof of its mouth and into the skull. The wyvern shrieked, thrashing violently. Aaron held on as it convulsed, teeth snapping like thunder. Then came the sharp crack. The wyvern's jaws closed around the spear, biting clean through the shaft. Aaron stumbled back, gripping only the lower half. The creature spasmed once more, then collapsed in a thunderous heap. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Steam hissed from the corpse, filling the air with the smell of scorched stone and blood. Aaron stood over it, chest heaving.
5 years, and you still almost got me.
He looked down at the broken weapon, then at the wyvern's gaping mouth. Deep inside, the blade still glinted between its teeth.
Figures.
Without hesitation, he shoved his arm into the creature's mouth, shoulder deep in blood and heat, until his fingers brushed the weapon. With a sharp twist, he pulled it free. The tail blade slid out cleanly, gleaming in the firelight, perfect, untarnished, and wickedly sharp. He turned it in his hand, testing the balance. It was shorter now, but it felt right, lighter, faster, closer to a sword now.
Guess you just wanted a new shape.
He dropped the splintered wooden shaft to the ground and stepped toward the cave's mouth. Outside, the storm had stilled. The air was sharp and clean. Far below, the Hellwood spread endlessly, dark and alive. Aaron smiled faintly.
5 years of hell, and I'm still here.
He walked into the light, the broken blade glinting red in the dawn. By the time Aaron reached the lower cliffs, the mountain air had thinned into something crisp and bright. He stopped on a rocky ledge, breathing deep, the Hellwood stretching endlessly beneath him. For the first time in 5 years, the forest looked calm, peaceful even. The wind carried no scent of blood, no growl of beasts, just the sigh of leaves far below. Then, in the distance, a thin column of gray rose into the sky. He frowned.
Smoke?
At first, he thought it was just a wildfire, a dry patch catching from lightning or heat. But as he watched, the pattern was too clean, the rise too steady. Someone was tending it. He blinked, almost laughing.
No, that's not a fire, that's a camp.
For a long moment, he just stood there, staring. After half a decade of silence, the idea of someone else felt impossible. But the smoke stayed. He grinned, wide and reckless.
After all this time, there's actually people out there.
He climbed the nearest tree, branches cracking under his hands as he rose through the leaves until he saw it again. Still there, a thin line on the horizon. His chest felt tight, but not from exhaustion. He exhaled, half in disbelief.
5 years of talking to bones and eating poison berries, and now I find civilization by accident. Figures.
He dropped down from the tree, landing hard, and broke into a run. The forest blurred around him as he vaulted over roots and crashed through brush, eyes locked on that thin trail of smoke. Every few miles he scaled another tree, checking his direction, adjusting his course. The air grew warmer, the sound of birds returned, and something inside him, something long buried, began to stir.
Don't disappear on me now. I've had enough ghosts for one lifetime.
Whatever waited there, people, danger, or something in between, didn't matter. For the first time since waking in this world, Aaron Rains had somewhere to go. And he wasn't slowing down for anyone. Aaron smelled smoke long before he saw it. He slowed, crouching low as he moved through the undergrowth. The forest ahead opened into a small clearing. A shattered wagon lay tipped on its side, one wheel broken clean off, its contents scattered across the ground. Shattered shields, snapped spears, and streaks of blood told the story before he even saw the monster. The chimera stood in the center of it all, a hulking mass of muscle and fury. The body of a lion, the wings of a bat, the tail of a serpent curling and hissing behind it. Its three heads tore at something in the dirt that had once been a man. Aaron exhaled slowly, tightening his grip on the weapon in his hand, a broken spear, shortened over years of repair until it was now more sword than staff. The blade was a jagged length of polished bone from the tail of a razor-tail serpent. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. He stepped out of the brush.
Do you guys mind if I join the fun?
The chimera froze, all three heads turning toward him. The serpent hissed first, and then the lion roared, a sound that rattled the trees. Aaron charged. The serpent head struck fast, but he was faster. He ducked low and swung up in a rising arc, cleaving through its neck in one motion. Hot blood sprayed across his arm. The lion lunged next, claws raking through the dirt. He sidestepped and drove the blade deep into its chest, twisting until the heart gave. The weapon felt awkward in his hands, too short for a spear, too heavy for a proper sword. It didn't move like he expected. Skill increased, sword mastery plus 0.1, total 8.2. He gritted his teeth.
Still not my weapon of choice.
The guard circled, emboldened. The goat head lunged from the side, teeth snapping into his shoulder. He grunted, slammed his elbow into its jaw, and wrenched himself free. Blood ran down his arm, and then stopped, the wound sealing itself in seconds as regeneration did its work. Aaron spun, driving the blade upward through the goat's throat. The beast convulsed, wings thrashing once before collapsing in a heap. The clearing went still. Aaron stood over the body, panting lightly.
Not exactly how I pictured saying hello. Guess I'm still better with a spear.
He nudged the corpse with his foot, half expecting it to move again. When it didn't, he finally looked past it and saw them. A handful of soldiers, wounded but alive, lay scattered near the wrecked wagon. One man, tall, scarred, carrying himself with the weary discipline of command, was pushing himself to his feet. His blade was dull and notched from battle. And beside the overturned carriage, gripping the splintered frame for balance, stood a young woman in a torn, mud-stained gown. Her long hair was tangled, her face pale beneath streaks of dirt, but her eyes were steady and bright. The soldiers stared at Aaron in disbelief.
You slew that thing alone?
Aaron nodded once.
Been living here 5 years. Haven't seen anyone since.
The woman took a small step forward, still trembling.
Then, we owe you our lives.
Aaron blinked, caught off guard by her sincerity. He gave a small, crooked smile.
You don't owe me anything. Just keep breathing. That's payment enough.
She let out a shaky laugh that was half a sob.
Still, thank you.
He nodded once, then turned his attention toward the wagon. The smell of blood was stronger there, heavier, wrong. His expression hardened.
You're carrying corpses.
The captain's jaw tightened.
We couldn't abandon them.
Aaron's voice softened, but his tone stayed firm.
I understand. They were your men, but keeping them with you will bring predators. If you bury them, something will dig them up. And if you keep them in that wagon, you'll be next.
The woman's eyes lowered.
Then what should we do?
Aaron glanced between them.
We give them a proper send-off. Burn them here, say your farewells, hold a short memorial. I'll keep watch while you do. You deserve that much. But once it's done, we move.
The captain studied him for a moment, then nodded.
A brief memorial, then.
The soldiers set to work. Aaron helped drag the bodies into place and gathered broken spears and wagon planks for fuel. When the pyre was ready, the princess knelt beside it, whispering a prayer too soft to hear. Aaron stood nearby, scanning the trees, eyes sharp, body still. The flames rose slowly, turning the clearing gold and red. When the last of the fire died down, she turned to him again.
You've really been here all this time?
He nodded.
Yeah, long enough to forget what people sound like.
The captain stepped forward.
You've got strength we could use, and you've earned our trust already. I don't know how we can repay you.
Aaron adjusted the strap of his satchel.
Maybe start by telling me how to get out of this forest.
The soldiers exchanged glances. The captain frowned.
You don't know the way?
Aaron shook his head.
I've been wandering for years. This place doesn't let people leave easily.
After a moment's pause, the captain extended his hand.
We're heading east, To the estate of Duchess Verena. If you'll help protect us on the road, we'll show you the way out.
Aaron looked at the offered hand, then at the princess.
Seems fair. I help you get there. You help me get out.
The princess smiled faintly.
Then it's settled.
Aaron glanced once more at the still-smoking chimera.
Let's not make this kind of meeting a habit.
Darian chuckled under his breath.
Agreed.
And as the flames faded behind them, Aaron Rains, the man who had once died 100 times, took his first steps alongside the living again. The forest thickened as they traveled east. The wagon was beyond saving, so they took what they could carry: food, medicine, a few unbroken weapons. The horses were hitched and loaded with supplies, the princess and Captain Darian riding while the remaining guards marched beside them. Aaron walked ahead, barefoot and silent, scanning the path. His eyes moved constantly, reading the forest like a map. Every bent branch, every faint track in the dirt meant something to him. To the soldiers, it was like following a ghost. One of them whispered.
Does he ever sleep?
Darian replied quietly.
Maybe the forest taught him not to.
By nightfall, they made camp beside a stream. The soldiers built a small fire, careful to shield it from view. Aaron returned with 2 rabbits and a handful of forest fruit, enough to feed everyone. He crouched by the fire, skinning the rabbits with the edge of his broken blade. The guards watched him in quiet fascination as his hands worked with efficient precision.
You move like a hunter.
Aaron didn't look up.
I had good teachers.
Darian frowned.
Out here, there's no one in these woods.
Didn't say they were human.
Aaron smiled faintly. Celine sat across the fire, wrapped in a cloak that looked too fine for the dirt around it. She studied him for a long time before speaking.
You really don't remember how you came here?
He shook his head.
No. I remember dying once. Then I woke up in this forest and haven't seen a human face since. Until today.
Darian and the others exchanged uneasy glances. Celine hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of her cloak.
Then maybe fate brought you to us.
Aaron huffed a soft laugh.
Fate or bad luck. Hard to tell the difference sometimes.
As the fire burned lower, conversation turned quiet. The guards ate sparingly, eyes shifting to the shadows beyond the firelight. Finally, Celine spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper.
The forest isn't the only thing trying to kill us.
Aaron looked up.
No?
She met his eyes.
The Grand Chancellor, Lorne, he murdered my father, the king.
The words landed like stones in the silence. The guards bowed their heads, their grief still fresh. Aaron's brows furrowed.
Why?
To take the throne. He was my father's most trusted advisor. But when the council refused to grant him the crown, he decided to take it himself. Now he's forcing me to marry him, to make his claim legitimate.
Aaron frowned.
Can't you just not?
Darian let out a short, humorless laugh.
If only it were that simple.
Celine smiled faintly, though her eyes were sad.
The law doesn't allow a woman to rule alone. If I refuse him, he'll take the throne by force anyway, and probably have me executed for treason.
Aaron leaned back, staring into the fire.
You know, where I come from, that's not how it works. You don't have to marry the guy who kills your dad to keep your job.
Celine blinked, startled, then actually laughed, a soft, genuine sound that made the guards look up.
You speak so strangely. I can't tell if you're joking.
A little of both, but I get it now. You're running to safety.
Darian nodded.
To Duchess Verena. She's one of the last nobles still loyal to the royal line. If anyone can shelter the princess, it's her.
Aaron looked between them, then toward the trees.
And in exchange for helping you get there, you'll show me the way out of this place.
That was our agreement.
Aaron gave a small nod.
Then we'd better keep moving.
They broke camp at dawn, their small band disappearing into the mist. 3 weeks passed. The deeper they went, the thicker the forest grew, vines curling like veins across the ground, trees stretching so high their branches blotted out the sun. Progress was slow but steady. Aaron had learned to move at the group's pace, though it grated on him. They were loud, heavy-footed, and cautious where he preferred efficiency. Still, he couldn't help but respect their discipline. At night, they camped in narrow clearings where the light barely reached. Aaron would hunt small game while the guards prepared defensive rings of sharpened stakes. It had become a rhythm, strange but almost peaceful. One evening, as he cleaned the day's catch beside the fire, Celine sat across from him with a small smile.
You don't talk much.
He smirked.
5 years alone will do that to a person.
She tilted her head.
Do you ever miss it? The quiet?
Aaron looked up at her, surprised by the question.
Sometimes, but it's nice hearing voices that don't growl before trying to eat me.
She laughed softly.
Then we'll do our best to stay talkative.
Darian glanced between them from his post.
Careful, princess. You'll spoil the wild man before we reach civilization.
Aaron shrugged.
Too late for that.
The princess smiled at him, genuinely this time, and for a moment the forest didn't feel quite so heavy. The next morning they moved through a fog-drenched ravine when the attack came. The first scream cut through the mist like a blade. Shadows lunged from both sides, thin, pale creatures with hollow eyes and arms like spears. Aaron reacted first. He drew his broken weapon and charged, intercepting the nearest one. The blade caught its neck cleanly, severing it in one motion. But in the chaos, he heard the sound of steel snapping. His weapon, his makeshift sword, finally gave out, the bone blade shattering against the creature's armor.
Damn it.
He tossed the broken hilt aside. Darian caught sight of it immediately.
Reigns.
He kicked a fallen soldier's pack open with his boot. He pulled free a spare longsword and hurled it through the air. Aaron caught it by instinct, one hand reverse grip, and tested the weight mid-spin. The balance was different, the blade heavy and cold, the kind of steel he hadn't felt since before the forest.
Use that! Make it count!
Aaron flipped the weapon forward and grinned.
Gladly.
He stepped into the next swing with practiced precision, the sword cutting through the creature's chest in a clean arc. It felt alien, heavier, slower, but it worked. Skill increased, sword mastery plus 0.1, total 12.6. He exhaled sharply.
All right, guess this'll do.
The next wave came fast, but the line held. Darian fought at his flank, the two men moving in perfect rhythm, soldier and survivor, both hardened by years of violence. Within minutes, the ravine was quiet again. When it was over, Darian clapped him on the shoulder.
You fight like someone who's seen too much of war.
Aaron wiped his blade clean on the grass.
Or just someone who's bad at dying.
The captain chuckled softly.
Either way, I'm glad you're on our side.
Later that night, they camped in a hollow surrounded by roots as thick as walls. Aaron sat apart, sharpening his new sword with slow, careful strokes. The edge caught the firelight, gleaming faintly. Celine approached quietly and knelt beside him.
You're getting used to it.
He nodded.
Still feels wrong in the hand, but I'll figure it out.
Is it so different from your spear?
Like night and day.
He looked down at the weapon.
But I've got time.
She smiled softly.
Then you'll master it soon enough.
He met her gaze and returned the smile.
Yeah, maybe.
The fire popped, sending sparks into the air. For the first time in a long while, Aaron felt something he hadn't known he'd missed. Belonging. By the time they reached the forest's edge, the world looked almost unreal. The endless green gave way to open fields, to sky so wide and blue it hurt Aaron's eyes. He stopped at the tree line and stared.
Didn't think I'd ever see open land again.
Darian turned in the saddle beside him, smiling faintly.
Most who enter those woods never do.
Aaron squinted toward the horizon. In the distance lay faint rooftops, the first sign of human life he'd seen in years.
Guess that makes me lucky.
One of the soldiers muttered.
Or cursed.
Aaron smirked.
That depends on what's waiting out there.
They made camp in the rolling hills before the town. It was there that Darian finally noticed Aaron's clothes, or lack thereof.
Reigns, you can't walk into the Duchess's estate looking like that.
Aaron looked down at himself. Bare chest, weathered skin, the short hide loincloth that had served him for years.
What? Too rustic?
Celine stifled a laugh behind her hand.
You look like you escaped from a legend.
Close enough.
Darian sighed, pulling open one of the supply packs.
Here, one of the spare uniforms from the fallen guard. It's not perfect, but it'll help you blend in.
Aaron took the folded cloth, inspecting the crest of the royal guard stitched across the shoulder.
Won't the Duchess notice I'm not one of yours?
Better she think you're a soldier than some half-naked savage. Besides, you've earned it.
Aaron nodded and slipped away behind a nearby ridge to change. When he returned, the uniform fit tight across his shoulders and chest, a size too small but intact. For the first time in years, he felt the strange weight of real fabric against his skin. Celine smiled.
You look proper.
Aaron raised an eyebrow.
Not sure that's a compliment.
Darian chuckled.
Close enough.
Aaron smirked and tugged at the collar.
Proper, huh? Don't get used to it. I clean up maybe once every 5 years.
Celine laughed, the sound bright after so many days of weary silence.
Then I'm glad I caught the occasion.
He met her eyes, and for a moment, the noise of the camp faded. There was a spark there. Curiosity, maybe something more.
Well, Princess, if I'd known I'd be traveling with royalty, I might have tried harder to make a better first impression.
Celine tilted her head, smiling faintly.
Oh, I think you made quite an impression already.
Darian rolled his eyes.
Save the charm for the Duchess, Rains. You'll need it.
Aaron grinned, but as Celine turned away, he found himself watching her a little too long. And for the first time in years, the road ahead didn't seem quite so lonely. By dusk, they reached the outskirts of the town. People stopped to stare as they passed. A small, battered escort of royal guards escorting a cloaked noblewoman and a soldier with eyes too sharp for peace. Aaron kept his head low, feeling the press of civilization all around him, the chatter, the smell of bread, the hum of life. It was overwhelming. The Duchess's estate stood on a low hill at the far edge of the city, a sprawling manor of white stone and gold-trimmed windows. Its banners fluttered gently in the wind. Darian called out to the gatekeeper.
Open the gates. Captain Darian of the Royal Guard, escorting Her Highness Princess Celine.
The gate swung open without hesitation. Aaron followed close behind as they entered the courtyard. The soldiers exhaled in relief, the journey through the forest finally over. Inside, servants hurried to greet them. A woman in a flowing blue gown descended the steps with practiced grace.
Captain Darian, I feared the worst.
Darian bowed.
Your Grace, Verena. The road was not kind.
Her gaze moved past him and landed on Aaron.
And who is this?
Darian hesitated.
A man who saved us in the forest. Without him, none of us would have made it here.
Verena's expression softened into polite curiosity.
Then you have my thanks, stranger.
Aaron inclined his head.
Just doing what I could.
Modesty is a rare trait. You're welcome under my roof.
Celine stepped forward.
We'll rest only briefly, Your Grace. Then we must plan our next move.
Of course.
She gestured for servants to lead them inside. Aaron lingered a moment longer, glancing up at the elegant arches and polished marble. After 5 years of dirt, blood, and silence, the luxury felt foreign, fragile even. He whispered under his breath.
Let's hope this place is safer than it looks.
The Duchess's estate was beautiful, almost too beautiful. Aaron had never seen marble halls or golden chandeliers before. The polished floors reflected candlelight like still water. Every inch of the place was meant to impress, to remind visitors that wealth and power still ruled even in chaos. To him, it all felt fragile, breakable in the wrong hands. Servants hurried to bring food and clean water. Aaron stood awkwardly near the entrance until Darian waved him toward the table.
Eat, Rains. You've earned it.
He nodded and took a seat at the far end, careful not to stain the silk cloth. The food tasted unreal after years of raw meat and berries, roast duck, honeyed bread, real wine. His instincts almost refused it at first, too rich, too foreign. But hunger won. Celine watched him with quiet amusement.
You're not used to banquets, I take it.
Aaron smirked.
You could say that. My last dinner guest tried to bite me.
She laughed softly, then grew serious again.
It's strange. Being safe. I keep expecting something to go wrong.
He glanced around the room, eyes narrowing slightly.
You and me both.
That night, the Duchess invited Celine and Darian to her private chambers to discuss plans for the capital. Aaron stayed behind, watching the servants clear the table. Something about the stillness of the house felt wrong. The guards had been given rooms elsewhere, far from the main hall. The servants moved quietly, too quietly. Their eyes never met his. When he finally turned toward the guest quarters assigned to him, a faint sweetness lingered in the air, the same floral scent that had clung to the Duchess's wine. Aaron frowned, rolling it across his tongue.
Poison. Guess she doesn't know that trick stopped working about 2 years ago.
He started to turn toward the door and froze. A whisper of armor scraped against the marble behind him. He half turned, but too late. A blade punched clean through his back, bursting out his chest. His breath caught mid-gasp. The pain hit an instant later, white-hot and blinding. The guard leaned close, voice cold and steady.
The Duchess sends her regards.
Aaron's eyes widened, then dimmed. His knees buckled, and he collapsed forward onto the floor, blood spreading in a dark pool beneath him. The last thing he heard was the guard's footsteps fading into the hall. Then silence. Skill increased, death resistance +1, total 100. He woke to motion. The world rocked slowly, rhythmically, his face dragged against rough cobblestone, his arms limp at his sides. Someone was hauling him by the shoulders, a servant, small and struggling, muttering curses under his breath.
Dead weight. Could have just dumped him in the wine cellar till morning.
Aaron's fingers twitched, the servant froze. A moment later, Aaron's hand shot out, gripping the man's wrist like iron. The servant screamed. Aaron opened his eyes, calm and cold.
You should have made sure,
the man stammered.
But please, the Duchess said you were dead. She said...
Aaron's voice dropped to a quiet growl.
Then she's about to be disappointed.
Before the servant could speak again, Aaron drove his fist into the man's jaw, hard enough to drop him instantly. He stood there for a moment, breathing evenly, eyes adjusting to the faint torchlight. His shirt hung in tatters, the hole through it slick with dried blood, but his chest beneath perfectly healed. He looked down at the crimson smear trailing along the stones behind him, his own blood, and then back toward the mansion.
100 deaths. Guess I'm getting the hang of it.
Then he turned and started walking, barefoot, silent, unrelenting, back toward the Duchess's hall. He moved through the mansion like a ghost, silent and furious. The guards who rushed to intercept him didn't stand a chance. He didn't even draw a weapon, just moved, dodged, struck, bones cracked beneath his blows. Skill increased, unarmed combat plus 0.3, total 41.7. When the last guard hit the floor, Aaron paused, breathing steadily through his nose. The hallway was littered with broken bodies and dropped weapons. He crouched beside one of the fallen men and pulled a sword from his limp hand. The blade gleamed faintly in the candlelight, clean, balanced, and sharp. He turned it once in his grip, testing the weight.
That'll do.
Sliding the weapon through his belt, he rose again, his expression unreadable. Then he shoved open the doors to the Duchess's chamber. Verena turned, startled but trying to mask it with a composed smile.
You're alive?
He stepped forward, eyes like burning coals.
You should have made sure before you buried me.
She backed away, hands trembling.
You don't understand. The Grand Chancellor, he offered protection. His men were coming. I had no choice.
Aaron's voice was cold.
You always have a choice.
Her hand darted toward a bell rope, a call for her guards. But Aaron was faster. He caught her wrist, twisted gently until she froze.
Where is she?
The princess? He took her. Lorne came himself with a detachment. He's gone to the capital. He means to marry her by force, before the court.
Aaron's expression darkened. The rage behind his eyes was steady now, controlled, focused.
Then you're of no more use.
No, wait.
The sound of his strike echoed through the hall, quick, final, clean. Verena crumpled silently to the floor. Aaron turned and walked away without looking back. He found Darian and the remaining guards outside the city walls, already preparing to leave. They froze when they saw him approach, blood on his hands, eyes sharp with purpose.
The Duchess sold us out. Lorne's taken the princess. He's heading for the capital.
Darian's jaw tightened.
Then we follow.
Aaron nodded once.
We move fast. We don't have much time.
And as the dawn broke over the hills, Aaron Rains, survivor of the Hellwood, set his sights on the castle of Evermere. They left the Duchess's estate before dawn, the first light of morning breaking over the hills. The city behind them was silent, too silent. Not even the wind dared stir the empty banners on the walls. Darian led them east along the trade road, his expression carved from stone. The surviving guards followed in weary silence, the weight of betrayal still fresh in every step. They had no horses. The Grand Chancellor's men had taken them all. So they walked, heavy armor, wounded pride, and grim determination. Aaron stayed near the front, scanning the road ahead. The sword he'd taken from the Duchess's guard hung at his side, its weight a quiet reminder of what had been lost. No one spoke for hours. By midday, they stopped near a stream to rest. The men refilled their flasks, washed their faces, and shared what rations they had left. Aaron sat apart, leaning against a tree, sharpening the sword in rhythmic silence. The sound of steel on stone carried through the still air. Darian watched him for a while before finally speaking.
You don't rest much, do you?
Aaron looked up.
Rest doesn't help when the people you're chasing aren't sleeping either.
Darian gave a short, tired chuckle.
You sound like someone who's done a lot of chasing.
Aaron shrugged.
Spent 5 years hunting beasts that didn't know how to stop moving. Guess I picked up the habit.
Darian nodded slowly, staring at the water as it drifted past.
You cared about her.
Aaron didn't answer right away. The sharpening stopped. He looked down at the reflection of the blade and at his own face, hollow and determined.
Yeah, I did.
Darian's voice lowered.
Then I hope you catch him, Rains. For all our sakes.
Aaron stood, sheathing his sword.
You and me both, Captain.
They traveled through the following day, the road winding through farmland and sparse woods. Villagers stopped to stare as the small group passed, a battered company of royal guards and a man who looked too wild to belong among them. At night, they made camp in the shelter of a low hill. The fire crackled weakly against the cold. Darian spread a worn map across the ground.
We're 3 days out if we push hard, but Lorne's riders have a full day's lead, maybe more. They'll be swapping horses at every way station.
Aaron crouched beside him, eyes on the map.
How many outposts between here and the capital?
4, at least along this road. If he's smart, he's moving quick and light.
Aaron traced the route with one finger, thoughtful.
Then I'll have to move quicker.
Darian looked up.
You're planning to go ahead?
Planning to catch him.
The captain's jaw tightened.
You've been carrying us since the forest, Rains. Don't push yourself now.
Aaron smiled faintly.
You're good soldiers, but you've got to protect each other. I'm just faster.
Darian hesitated, then nodded slowly.
You're right. We'll only slow you down.
He unfastened a small satchel from his belt, dried rations, water, a handful of coin.
You'll need it.
Aaron accepted it without a word.
I'll find her, Captain. You just keep your men alive.
Darian gripped his forearm in a soldier's clasp.
For her sake, and yours, make it count.
Aaron nodded once, turned, and started walking. Then running. Then sprinting. By the time the sun climbed above the hills, he was a blur on the road, bare boots pounding the dirt, cloak snapping in the wind. He passed merchants, travelers, wagons, all of whom turned to stare as he thundered past, a man moving faster than a horse at full gallop, his eyes locked straight ahead. Hours passed. The air grew dry. His breathing stayed even, his pace unbroken. He was a machine of flesh and fury, built by the forest itself. Occasionally, he spotted distant outposts, small military way stations where riders swapped tired horses for fresh ones. The sight only hardened his resolve.
They can trade mounts, but they can't trade lungs.
He ran through the day and into the night, his regeneration keeping him alive where any normal man would have collapsed. The stars blurred overhead. His mind drifted between memory and purpose, one thought pulsing through every heartbeat. Celine was his only thought. He pushed on until the horizon swallowed the last of the sun. The road turned black beneath his feet, and the forest on either side became a wall of shadow. Clouds smothered the sky. There was no moon, no light at all. He tried to keep running, but the darkness grew absolute, a living thing that clawed at his vision. Every few steps he stumbled, catching himself before he fell.
Damn it.
He slowed to a stop, his voice vanished into the night. He couldn't see the road, couldn't tell where it ended and the forest began. Even his own hands were just shapes against deeper black. For a long moment he stood there, listening. Wind, distant insects, the rhythm of his own heart. Then, reluctantly, he stepped off the road and found a tree large enough to lean against.
Fine, you win tonight.
He slid down the trunk, letting exhaustion settle in. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to rest. His eyes closed, the faint smell of earth and pine grounding him. Somewhere far ahead, his enemies slept comfortably, but dawn would come, and when it did, he'd be moving again. The world was gray when he opened his eyes. Mist clung to the road, damp and heavy, blurring the line between earth and sky. Aaron stood, brushing the dew from his arms, and stretched until his joints cracked. Every muscle ached, not from weakness, but from use. He took a breath, tasting the cool morning air, then started running again. The first light of dawn painted the world in pale gold. Birds scattered as he passed, startled by the blur of motion. His mind was clear, his body tuned for one purpose, to reach the capital before it was too late. By midday, the ground began to change. The grass grew shorter, the dirt packed firm underfoot, and wagon tracks cut deep into the road. Civilization. He pushed harder. Soon, the spires of Evermere came into view, tall white towers reaching above a sea of rooftops. For a moment, he slowed, the sight hitting harder than he expected. After years in the forest, the city looked almost unreal.
Guess I made it.
But before he could take another step, a sound broke through the air, low and distant at first, then spreading like a ripple through the valley. A bell. Then another, and another. He stopped dead in the road. The rhythm was steady, ceremonial, unmistakable. He'd heard bells like this before, back when the world still made sense. A wedding? Aaron's chest tightened. His throat felt dry.
No, that can't be. You couldn't.
He clenched his fists, the tendons in his arms standing out like cords of steel.
Lorne, if you forced her into this.
The rest came out as a roar that sent nearby crows scattering.
Then I'll tear your castle down myself.
He broke into a sprint, faster than before, his exhaustion burned away by pure rage. The bells didn't sound like celebration anymore. They sounded like mockery. He ran through the valley, the great city rising before him in shining layers of stone and marble. Farmers turned from their fields as he thundered past, dirt streaked across his uniform, hair wild, eyes burning with purpose. The outer walls loomed ahead, guarded by men in the Grand Chancellor's colors. They shouted as he approached.
Stop him.
Close the gate.
Too late. Aaron slammed into the gates with all his strength. The wood shuddered, hinges shrieked, and the doors burst inward under the impact, sending guards sprawling. Before they could recover, he was already past them, sprinting through narrow streets and winding alleys, the sound of the bells echoing overhead. The city was alive with celebration. Flowers on the windowsills, banners strung between rooftops, crowds gathering near the castle hill. Aaron didn't see any of it. He ran straight for the heart of Evermere, the towering castle whose golden spires glinted in the sun. As he neared the grand staircase, a soldier lunged at him, sword drawn. Aaron sidestepped, grabbed the man's wrist, and slammed him hard into the wall. Another came from behind. Aaron ducked low, spun, and drove his shoulder into the man's chest, sending him sprawling down the steps. He didn't draw his weapon. Not yet. Every second mattered, and he couldn't afford to waste time. At the top of the stairs, he slammed both hands against the great doors of the throne hall. They groaned under the force, then burst inward, light spilling across the marble floor. Inside, a crowd of nobles turned in shock. At the far end, before the throne itself, Princess Celine stood in a flowing white gown beside Grand Chancellor Lorne. A priest held the sacred text between them, hands trembling. Aaron's chest heaved. His voice came out rough but clear enough to cut through the stunned silence.
You murdered the king, and now you try to steal his daughter?
The words echoed through the chamber. The nobles gasped. The chancellor's eyes narrowed.
Seize him!
The chancellor's voice cracked like a whip. Steel flashed as guards poured into the throne hall from both sides, veterans in polished armor, each bearing the insignia of Evermere's elite. Through the shattered doorway behind him, the soldiers who had chased Aaron through the city finally stumbled in, panting and drenched in sweat. They slowed as they entered, taking in the chaos, the nobles, the glinting marble floor, and the man they'd been ordered to stop. Now dozens of blades surrounded him, fresh soldiers ahead, winded pursuers behind. Guests screamed and scattered, boots clattering across marble, silk and lace flashing toward the exits. Aaron stood alone in the center of the aisle, the sound of steel scraping from every direction. He exhaled slowly.
All right, let's make this quick.
He drew the sword from his belt. The first guard lunged. Aaron parried too high, sloppy, off balance, and the man's blade sliced across his shoulder. Blood sprayed, but the wound sealed itself before it could stain his uniform. Another strike came from the left. He blocked barely. His counterattack missed entirely. He grimaced.
Right, not my weapon.
The guards circled, emboldened. Then one voice rose above the rest. The captain of Lorne's guard, a tall man with a scar from jaw to temple and a wolf's head sigil on his chest plate.
Careful. That one's no ordinary soldier, but he fights like a man new to his blade.
He stepped forward, lifting his own sword. The steel shimmered faintly, enchanted.
You face Captain Garen of the Silver Guard. Swordsmanship level 43.
A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Even the nobles who hadn't fled looked impressed. In Evermere, such a number was the mark of a master. Aaron tilted his head, wiping blood from his lip with his thumb.
43, huh? That's cute.
Garen sneered.
You think yourself better, wild man?
No, just faster.
The captain lunged. Their blades met, sparks flying, and for a moment Aaron held his own. Then Garen twisted, forcing him back, the edge biting deep into Aaron's ribs. The onlookers gasped as blood welled, only for the wound to close before their eyes. Aaron's grin was sharp.
See? Told you.
He swung again, awkward but powerful, catching Garen off guard and sending him sprawling into the nearest column. More soldiers rushed in, surrounding him. Steel clanged, shouts filled the chamber, and Aaron moved like a storm. But even with all his strength and speed, the sword felt wrong in his hand. Too light, too short, too foreign. Then he saw it. One of the guards carried a spear. The soldier lunged, shouting as the steel point drove straight for Aaron's chest. Aaron twisted aside, feeling the blade brush the fabric of his uniform. Before the man could recover, Aaron caught the shaft mid-thrust, yanked it forward, and slammed his sword across the soldier's throat in one fluid motion. The man fell, and Aaron let the sword drop beside him. He turned the spear in his hands, testing its weight. Perfect, balanced, familiar. The world seemed to narrow to silence. Aaron smiled faintly.
Now this, I remember.
He moved. The next guard barely saw him, only the blur of motion and the gleam of steel. The spear whirled through the air, cutting down one man, then another, each strike flowing effortlessly into the next. It was as if his body had been waiting years for this moment. The guards regrouped, shouting commands, moving in formation, shields raised, blades flashing. They fought like veterans, disciplined and deadly. But discipline meant nothing against speed like his. Aaron's spear carved through the line, striking faster than thought. He swept one man's legs out, impaled another, and twisted free before the bodies even hit the floor. Every motion was precise, deliberate, the rhythm of a hunter who'd spent half a decade killing monsters that could level trees. Sparks showered from clashing blades, and the hall rang with steel and screams.
Hold the line.
The line broke anyway. A flash of silver. Aaron ducked, then drove the spear through the chest of the man behind him without even turning. He pivoted on his heel, spinning the weapon in a wide arc that cleaved through two more. Armor split like parchment. Captain Garen roared, charging again.
For Evermere.
Aaron met him head-on. Their weapons clashed, spear against sword, a blur of strikes too fast to follow. Garen's enchanted blade sparked with every block, but the captain was slowing, bleeding from shallow cuts he couldn't even feel yet.
You're strong, but you were never ready for this.
The spear struck once, twice, then drove through Garen's heart with the final thrust. The captain's sword fell from his hands. He hit the marble floor hard, eyes wide in disbelief. Silence rippled outward. The men who'd fought beside him froze, horror replacing discipline. Aaron stepped over the captain's body and turned toward the rest. The look on his face wasn't rage anymore. It was focus, cold, absolute focus.
Anyone else?
For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. Then one of the guard's swords slipped from his trembling hands and clattered across the marble. Another dropped his weapon next. The sound echoed like thunder in the hushed hall. Panic spread. Armor rattled, boots scraped, and suddenly half the silver guard was fleeing, shoving past one another in a desperate rush for the doors. Their discarded weapons lay scattered across the floor, gleaming in the firelight like a trail of surrender. Up on the dais, Grand Chancellor Lorne took one step back, his hand gripping the priest's shoulder for balance. His face had gone pale, eyes darting between Aaron and the corpses that littered the hall. The nobles whispered, some trembling, others too stunned to move. The air itself seemed to hum with dread. Aaron stood amid the wreckage, breathing steady, eyes locked on the man who'd caused all this. The marble beneath his boots was slick with blood, but he stood tall, unshaken. Then he raised his spear and leveled it toward the dais.
You're next.
For a long heartbeat, no one breathed. Then the Chancellor moved.
Guards, protect me. Do something.
No one moved. The survivors stood frozen, faces pale and slick with sweat. The bravest of them took a step backward instead of forward. Lorne's composure broke. He shoved the priest aside and stumbled down the dais stairs, his robes tangling around his boots.
You can't do this. You're a vagrant, a savage.
Aaron walked forward slowly, the spear resting across his shoulders.
Funny. That's what your soldiers called me too, before they stopped breathing.
Stay back.
He fumbled at his belt for a dagger, ornamental, gold inlaid, useless. The trembling in his hands betrayed him.
You don't understand. I rule this kingdom by right.
You ruled it by murder.
Aaron's tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. The words carried like thunder through the chamber.
You killed her father. You tried to take her crown. You would have caged her forever.
Lorne's gaze darted toward the far corner, a narrow service corridor half hidden behind a pillar. Aaron saw it too. The Chancellor bolted.
Of course, they always run.
He took a single step forward and threw. The weapon left his hand in perfect silence. No spin, no wasted motion. It cut through the air in a flat, deadly line, the shaft flexing once as it gained speed. The sound when it struck was final, a deep, solid thunk followed by the shattering crack of bone. The Chancellor jerked forward mid-stride, impaled clean through the back. The spearhead burst from his chest, the force driving him to his knees before he collapsed. For a moment he twitched, fingers clawing weakly at the shaft as if he could somehow pull it free. Then he went still. Silence again. Aaron walked forward and stopped beside the corpse. He rested one boot on the fallen Chancellor's shoulder and pulled the weapon loose with a smooth, practiced twist. Blood dripped from the blade onto the floor in steady rhythm. He stared down at the body for a long while. Then, almost softly, he said,
"That's for her father."
Behind him, the nobles stirred, whispers like wind through dry leaves.
The Chancellor is dead.
Who is that man?
He killed them all.
Aaron turned slowly. His gaze swept the room, from the terrified nobles to the cowering priest, and finally to the woman still standing near the dais, Princess Celine. She had not fled. She hadn't moved at all since the first blade was drawn. Now, tears streaked her cheeks, cutting clean lines through the dust on her skin. Aaron's voice gentled.
"It's over."
She stepped forward hesitantly, white gown streaked with crimson at the hem.
Is it? What happens now?
He looked around, the shattered throne room, the fallen guards, the nobles watching from behind trembling hands. Then his gaze found hers again.
Now you take your throne, and I figure out what comes after."
Celine's breath caught.
After?
Aaron nodded, his tone softening.
"You've lost everything tonight, Celine. Your father, your home, your crown nearly stolen. You shouldn't have to face the rest of this alone."
Her eyes welled again, tears glimmering in the light of the fallen chandeliers.
Then, what would you have me do?
He hesitated. For a man who had faced monsters, poison, and death itself, this was somehow harder. He rubbed the back of his neck, half smiling.
"I'm probably the last person you should trust with royal decisions, but I have one idea, maybe a foolish one."
Celine blinked through the tears, her voice trembling but curious.
What kind of idea?
"The kind that keeps me close and keeps you safe."
He took a slow breath, then stepped closer. His hand brushed hers, gentle, hesitant, almost reverent.
"Celine, marry me."
The words hung there between them, soft but sure. Her eyes widened.
You would really?
He smiled faintly, warmth returning to his voice.
"After everything we've survived together, there's nothing I'd want more."
For a heartbeat, silence reigned again. Then she laughed, a light, breathless sound that turned heads even among the stunned nobles. She covered her mouth, smiling through the tears.
Yes, I will.
Aaron smiled back, the kind of smile that came from somewhere deep, real, unguarded, and alive. He turned toward the priest still standing nearby, trembling.
"Would you mind doing the honors?"
The man nodded quickly, stammering.
Yes, of course.
The ceremony that followed was brief and quiet, spoken more from the heart than from tradition. When the vows were said, Aaron took Celine's hand and guided her up the dais. He seated her gently upon the queen's throne, then turned and took his place beside her. He didn't hesitate. He sat tall, steady, the spear resting upright beside him, the bearing of a man who had fought his way through hell itself to stand there. He looked down over the hushed hall, nobles staring, courtiers frozen between fear and awe.
"Anyone disagree?"
No one dared to answer. Celine turned to him and smiled, radiant even through the exhaustion and blood and ruin. And in that moment, amid the silence and the dying embers, the kingdom of Evermere had a new king and queen.